Hey, well, welcome to the end of the East Blue, at least for now. So, when I first watched the beginning of One Piece, and I've watched, about, like I said before, about the first hundred some odd episodes or so, um, I was really surprised at how quickly they actually made it to the Grand Line. With 61 episodes under their belt, they've made it to the Grand Line, and it seemed like, on some level, their main goal, which is to find the One Piece, wouldn't necessarily have to be that much further along. And, I don't know about the creation of this overall anime, and maybe there was the possibility that the series wasn't going to catch on, and so they were going to, end it in 3 or 4 seasons or something. And so, because of the episodic nature of One Piece, it doesn't really matter anyway. I mean, okay, so this particular island is going to be on one side of the divide between the East Blue and the Grand Line. Does it really make that much of a difference? Now, maybe. So far, what we've seen of the geography of this world, it's relatively nonsensical. And there's no particular reason why certain things should be in certain places and certain things should be in other places. I think back to this dragon subplot we had recently and this lost island, this island in the fog that they found. Well, they really did find an island surrounded by a weird mirror effect and fog and a huge hurricane. They really did find an island in the center of all that. And despite the fact that that island ultimately seemed to be a bit of a red herring in terms of where the Lost Island was and where the dragon nesting ground was, it hasn't really cleared up why that island exists in the first place. That's kind of a weird place. And the same thing is true of the entire Dragonite subplot. Yeah, sure, it looks like both Commander Nelson and Eric are deceased now, but that's not necessarily the case. Buggy survived when he probably shouldn't have, and other people have survived attacks when we thought that they had been dispatched as well. So we can't say for certain at this point if we're entirely done with that island and with that subplot. I mean, after all, we have to assume that if Commander Nelson was that invested in, Commodore Nelson was that invested in Dragonite, that other people in the Marines might have been as well. And Eric, maybe we will find out a little bit more about who Eric was and where he came from. Quite frankly, knowing that, the Baroque Works is coming up fairly soon, he looks like somebody who could be associated with that organization. But it remains too soon to know. And I don't want to give out, what little spoilers I know, and I don't want you guys to give out what kind of spoilers you might have, considering that some of you I know have watched the entire series and are very familiar with the general lore and mythos of One Piece. So we're just going to go piece by piece, what information we have at the time. So what I do want to say here is that these last couple of stories in the East Blue, namely Arlong Park and Rogue Town, and the Dragon story. What's going on with these stories? Well, I've said before, and when I covered the episodes of Arlong Park, that Arlong Park really has a darkness to it that kind of, I don't know. I kind of see, the Luffy and his friends almost seem like those kids on Usopp's island that are like just playing at being pirates at some point. And it seems that to some extent they are increasingly learning that there are real stakes and real danger and, a depth to what they're doing that, they can't continue playing pirate necessarily for too much longer. And I have a feeling that once the Grand Line stories get going, that some of that necessary maturation in their understanding of the world is going to start to happen. Maybe I'm wrong. I do know, like I said, I do know about the next 40 or so episodes of what's coming, but that's paltry compared to, the other 1,000 that I have no clue about. But it does seem that they're learning that there are stakes, which is one of the things that's interesting. There's a 30 million berry bounty on Luffy, and for what? Now, what has he done? He's gone up against the Marines a couple of times, but the 3 Marine captains that he's specifically taken out have been corrupt. The rat-faced guy whose name I don't remember and don't care about. The axe hand Morgan guy, and this Commodore Nelson. These are not. I mean, yeah, sure, he has taken out a whole bunch of Marines and a whole bunch of boats with the Commodore Nelson stuff, but seriously, he's taken out some creeps and some bad guys, and he got rid of. For all we know, he's completely gotten rid of Arlong. He's completely ended the career of that Karu guy. He has, disrupted Buggy's operations. He's disrupted Avila's operations. I mean, balance for balance, I would think overall the Marines wouldn't necessarily be that upset, except, like I said, with this Commodore Nelson. I mean, taking out that entire Marine fleet with the Lost Island. Okay, so maybe that would justify a bit of a bounty. Maybe that would justify something. But of course, the bounty was put on before that, and the bounty was put on to him by the rat-faced guy, because the rat-faced guy was pissed off at him because he prevented the rat-faced guy from stealing the treasure from Arlong Park. So, how corrupt are the Marines? Now, at one point, it does mention that the Marines work on behalf of the, quote, world government. And, of course, we do see what seems to be Marines headquarters at one point in one episode. But at this point in the story, we don't really have a lot of information about who and what they are. And we do know they have some kind of relationship to the Seven Warlords, but at this point, we don't really know exactly who they are either, except we know that Hawkeye, Mihawk guy, is connected to them, is one of them perhaps, probably is, and that one of them might be a fishman, or they work with the fishmen. And the fishmen they work with are apparently stronger than Arlong, because Arlong was apparently, kicked out of the Grand Line by the other fishermen or something like that. The story is unclear, and I'm assuming that the fishmen will recur. And speaking of which, I would expect that a lot of, the East Blue will recur. The Baratier is a fascinating little island. I assume that entire island, restaurant, I assume that could recur, and so could any of the other characters here. There's an implication that Kaya, for instance, is going to continue some studies that might have her eventually connect with the story. Carmen, the cook that Sanji beats at Rogue Island, she of course intends to come after him and meet him again and challenge him again. And Captain Smoker intends to come back. I think the Full Metal Fist guy, I think he's planning to come back. Buggy, of course, and Avila are on their way. We don't know what happened to them right now. They kind of fell out of the story temporarily, but we should have every expectation they will come back. I don't know if Arlong will come back or not, but the Fishmen certainly will recur, I suspect. So, we've left a lot of things behind that definitely could recur and probably will. And what's interesting here is, there's some really fascinating devices and storytelling here, and I couldn't help but see how they kind of connected to other ideas out there in the world. Like the main character who runs the Baratii, he's a pirate cook. Well, the most famous pirate cook in history, in fictional history, was Long John Silver, of course, from Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island. So I think there is a, sort of a strange interconnectedness between things like that. Going up Reverse Mountain, there's kind of a Fitzcarraldo, the movie by Herzog, about taking a steamship up the side of a mountain. Now, they don't do it with these magic powers, but they get it up there. And there are other little echoes here and there, like the Calm Belt. Now, that reminds me of things like, Calm in The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, the same Samuel Taylor Coleridge poem. A painted ship upon a painted ocean, how calm the sea was before the events of that story occur. So we have, I think, quite a few little references, and if I were more knowledgeable, I would suspect, of some Japanese traditions, there are probably some other allusions and references going on. Isn't the entire plot of them defending Little Town where Nami comes from Arlong, isn't that like, the Seven Samurai kind of approach where you have these characters, and of course, Daddy the Father is straight out of Clint Eastwood and the spaghetti westerns, or perhaps even, The Man with No Name, or somebody from Pale Rider or something. So, there are, I think, quite a few of these deliberate allusions and references that are not necessarily carried to the extent they could be, but are there nonetheless to give a richness and a depth. And so, what should we expect from here on out? Well, that's a good question. Are we going to see them actually advance? And what I mean by that is, like I said before, there's an episodic, picaresque nature to this story where they just island hop. They go from one island to the next. And, like all the characters except the main characters, just disappear from the story for a while, perhaps forever. Like maybe we will never see those villagers that were in Nami's village again. Perhaps we'll never see the little dog Shushu and those characters again. Perhaps we'll never see, the characters from Usopp's home village again. We don't really know. But the fact of the matter is, they've moved on in the story to another chapter, and to some extent, it doesn't even matter how many episodes occur. It doesn't matter how many chapters occur. We can always just add one whenever we want to some extent. Which, in the geography. Now, I don't know anything about true marine geography, but I have to suspect that what we see here, this Grand Line and this Red Line and this Calm Belt, nonsense. Oh, excuse me. Nonsense. I don't think any of that has any relationship to reality whatsoever. Be that as it may, that's the world we're in here, and they can do with it what they will, and and make up whatever they want. So, yeah, I know a lot of fun things are coming, and I know some of the more celebrated episodes and storylines are coming. I know one or two of the storylines have gotten some critique, and I know there's some filler episodes, and I'll have to say that the animation during the Dragonite episodes was pretty poor. And in fact, other than the fact that I really did like the little girl, I didn't care for the Dragonite story too much. I thought that it was relatively just kind of throwaway at the moment. Now, could it recur? Certainly it could. And if it does come back and play a major role later, then perhaps I'll see that as a prelude that was interesting. But as it stands, I thought that whole bit was just kind of not really the best of what One Piece has to offer. Although certainly entertaining. You can't fault it for that. So, all right. So, on to the Grand Line.